Welcome to episode 44 of the Empowering Ability Podcast.
Welcome to the Empowering Ability Podcast, where we get you and your loved ones impacted by disability the information needed to live a full and meaningful life. Now here's your host, Eric Gall.
Hey folks, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Eric Gall. Today we are just going to jump right into it. So today's guest is Joscelyn Duffy. Joscelyn is a ghostwriter, communicator, and all-around super interesting person. So Joscelyn will share her story on the podcast, but she has gone through many different challenges in life and had a couple of near-death experiences that really set her back from where she was at in life. So she shares those experiences, and we have some great conversations around resiliency. Joscelyn offers her insights on resiliency and offers a couple of things that that you can try when you're facing challenges yourself to be resilient. We also have a really good conversation around empathy and compassion and what the difference between those two things are. And we get into a conversation around compassionate support and how to be a compassionate supporter. We talk about a study that shares some good insights around being a compassionate supporter. And we talk about how to put compassion into practice. Joscelyn also offers a model of compassion, which I found quite helpful. So here we go. Here's Joscelyn. Hey, Joscelyn. Welcome to the Empowering Ability Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
Yeah, my pleasure. So happy to have you on today and excited to really have you share your story with our audience and to help them kind of see the world through the lens that you've lived it, and to share some elements of that journey and to talk about some really exciting insights and things that you've experienced, and to dive into some great topics like compassion and empathy. So I just want to kind of hand you over the mic and let you tell your story and your journey, and then we'll kind of jump off from there. So so if you'd like to, I'll hand you over the mic and you can take it away.
Great, thank you. So if we're talking about empathy and compassion, I'd love to share with your audience how I came to the perspective I have on these values. So my background has always been as a writer and communicator, initially at the heart of the financial sector. So I was writing national newsletters, scripting broadcasts for presidents and CEOs, training financial advisors coast to coast how to build stock portfolios. So very fortunate early on. And then at 26, I was struck with a life-threatening case of lupus. So it's almost as though life was kind of tapping on me on the shoulder, giving me a little nudge, and I was going, no, it's good, I'm happy. And then I got the mallet to the head and went from training for a marathon, running as much as 26 kilometers in a single run, and playing sports and networking and loving my work, to being bedridden for the good part of 2 years with 2 to 3 half-decent waking hours a day. I had the complication of a blood clot that landed me in hospital, nearly costing me my life. So I literally went from running and thriving in life to being barely able to walk and dealing with fatigue that was so debilitating that it felt like 200 pounds were sitting on my shoulders. And really just trying to, work through the shock and that massive shift in our lives. As I know anyone has seen who's dealt with, unexpected adversity or trauma, and pushing through with mental fortitude and trying to rehabilitate to get back to the life that I loved, though also accepting that life could look different thereafter. So with my waking hours, I would take, one step at a time, starting to walk again, run again, bike again, and get back into the world very slowly. It was not a quick process. So it took a lot of compassion to get there. Compassion for myself and also welcoming supporters in. And as I began to heal, a lot of my healing came through writing, through really crafting my story, because I think writing about ourselves and where we've been and what we've learned from it allows us to extract meaning and create meaning from our experiences. So my book was called Unshakable to the Core, which is still available on Amazon. And in writing that book, I shared with others the life principles that got me through, such as maximizing the moment. How do you stay happy? How do you stay fulfilled and content when you have 2 to 3 half decent waking hours a day and you're used to living 16-hour days, doing everything possible? And then I moved on from that book to write a second that was a compilation of short stories of people I met who were living their lives with real passion and purpose. And I wrote it as a fiction because I wanted to showcase the best in others, but also allow people to share their story who were hesitant. I had an agoraphobic woman who didn't really want people to know that it was her, but her story was so incredible. So it being a fiction allowed her to tell me freely everything that she had felt, everything that she had struggled with and overcome, to go from being homebound in her bedroom and sometimes in her bedroom closet for 5 years to being out in the real world, crossing the street, getting on a bus. These were monumental moments for her. So that book, from there, from sharing those stories and gifting them to the people I wrote about, came the opportunity to write 4 memoirs or autobiographies. So my vocation as a ghostwriter, as a creative consultant, and now as a communication and contribution specialist for entrepreneurs, found me in the process of my healing. I'm now in my 15th and 16th book, and I'm supporting leaders around the world with their messages.
I love just your story in general, and there's so many things in there that I want to dive into. Maybe if we could just kind of go back to that point where there was that drastic change in your life. So, you went from being very active, playing provincial sports, in a very demanding career, to only having 2 or 3 good hours or hours awake in your day. So there's the physical change, which I can conceptualize, but can you bring us into what was going through in your mind and internally throughout that time period?
Yeah, and I think this is a natural progression for many people. Is my initial instinct was to want to hold on to everything. I wanted to get back to my financial work. I was still working, and I was literally hospitalized with a blood clot, got out of hospital, and was doing work from my bed at home. And just wanting to hold on to that and get back to it. And I mean, holding on to the desire to keep exercising was a good thing. I'm so glad that I had that ingrained in my lifestyle. I think that's huge for all of us to have that healthy, active lifestyle, because we never know where life's going to take us. And that gives us a certain amount of strength, a certain amount of fortitude. And when we're struck with unexpected adversity, we have that knowingness of, I need to do whatever I can to be mobile, to go out in the outdoors and go for a walk and keep moving forward. So I had that mindset already. I knew if I only did one thing in the day, it was that. It was being active with other people. So I combined those 2 experiences to build my strength. And I think the important thing is to always be open to change. And it sounds like commonplace to say so, but if I hung on to wanting to be back in the financial sector, I would never be where I am today. And I absolutely love what I'm doing, and I love the people I'm working with, and it's incredible. I'm working with people who want to change the world on a really big scale for the better, who believe in human potential and who are doing their piece to support that and to bring it to life. So I think just accepting that, coming to the point of acceptance where, okay, I may not be back where I was. And if I'm listening to life, it didn't club me over the head so I can just turn around and go back to doing what I was doing. It clubbed me over the head so I could wake up and go, oh, there's something else I'm meant to be doing. So opening myself to that was huge, and really embracing that. Now, that being said, I mean, this was 2 years of recovery and then some, still getting back to full steam. So this was a slow, progressive journey, though even though when I wasn't physically able to do things, I was still mentally fully alive. So I would lie in bed and envision everything that I would do when I was back at full physical capacity. That was my saving grace. So I think being compassionate with ourselves means understanding that our best is going to be different in every day and week and month, and that accepting that we're giving our best is what really matters. It's always going to be different, but what matters is that we're giving it. So my best when I was lying in bed was envisioning all those things. Was sending my love out and giving love to myself and really spending time being introspective and understanding what's going on in my body and what does this mean and what can I do to support my healing.
So it sounds like that time where you were in bed with, your own thoughts, it was really processing that, almost like a level of acceptance, just accepting the situation and the state that you were in and being comfortable with that and then moving forward from there. That's kind of what I'm getting from it. Is that what the experience is like?
You're spot on. And it's what you've just coined what I love to call the ideal realist perspective. Because I think idealism is like, oh, well, I'll never get sick and and no one in my family will ever be impacted by anything that will do them any harm. That's great, but is it realistic? No. The realist says, I accept what is. And that ideal realist says, now I'm going to do everything possible to make this the best it can be, to create meaning, to create joy, to create fulfillment.
Yeah, I love that. And those waking hours, it sounds, those 2 to 3 good hours that you described that you had per day, it sounds like you're very strategic around that and focused on exercise. So maybe taking those first steps and having that social component. Were those two things your main focus? And if they were, what benefits do you feel you got from those?
I think especially for those who are listening, who are spending so much time caring for others, in the time that you do have, focus it on your passion. Like, first and foremost, that's everything. I actually began, in addition to writing, which was a long time passion of mine, I began painting. And I was selling my paintings for hundreds of dollars that I was doing when I was ill in those waking hours. I would get up and I was barely awake. So I wasn't consciously going, I'm going to put this color here or this color there. Mm-hmm. It was almost like the painting was coming through me. And I painted and I exercised and I spent time with others. Those are my passions. And writing, like, it's creativity, it's growth, it's expansion. So whatever impassions you, in the time that you carve out for yourself, and please carve out that time, it's so important, that rejuvenating time, spend it on your passions. There may be, and they likely are different than what I did, but the important thing is that you identify what your passions are and maximize those moments that you have to yourself by dedicating them to your passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so important, right? It's what makes us unique as people and being able to express ourselves in those ways. One of the things that stuck out to me as you were sharing your story was really around change and embracing change. And the word that came through me, or it came into my mind, was resiliency. Because when there's change happening around you or to you physically, to work through that, I think that you need some element of resiliency. Could you maybe speak to that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. There are several simple points that I can point to in terms of resilience. What do we do when we're faced with these unexpected adversities or traumas or a continuous challenge? And the biggest for me was compassion and small action. So having compassion for yourself and understanding that even though you know where you want to get to, that it's going to take small actions, but every single one of those steps is important. I couldn't go and just step out the door and run my 26 kilometers that I was running just a few months before. I had to start with walking a few minutes at a time. And there's 2 experiences in my life where I've done this, where I've had to go from running up mountains to learning to walk again due to illness. So it really is those small action steps, but understanding, almost like seeing the big picture, and the small action are the details. So you're understanding that every step, it's like going up a staircase to your ultimate destination, but you have to take every step, and every step matters to get you to where you want to be. So embrace that moment and celebrate, your ability to take that one step on that one day. But then also keep in mind that ultimate vision, where you can be, who you can be, what you can create in your world for yourself and those that you're taking care of.
So just thinking through change and resiliency, and an example from, I guess, my life and in relation to developmental disability. So, my sister goes and does an exercise routine at a local gym, and there's an elevator that she has to take. So usually someone helps her with the elevator, and her transportation was running a little bit late. And she's waiting at the elevator. No one's there. There's no key in the elevator, and she can't get to her class, right? So then she has to figure out how to get the key to the elevator, and she has to talk to a new person to do that. And, she finally ends up figuring that out on her own, takes her a bunch of time, gets to the class, super frustrated, right? So I guess when people are going through even, what many people might consider a simple change or a simple challenge, do you have any thoughts on how to, either for that person to be resilient in that moment, or even for a supporter to help coach that person through that moment, to help them be open to the life that happens to us?
Yeah, I think from what you're saying, there's an element of flexibility in there. And having been someone who shared hospital rooms with people who are dying and faced 2 near-death experiences myself, like, we take ourselves way too seriously. Having that light heart and allowing ourselves to be flexible and take a different path than expected is so important. And I know that's difficult when you're working with someone who may think like, well, this is the way I have to do it. To really think like, well, what, making, something enjoyable out of it. Well, why don't we try this way? Because we know that we can decide that this is the exact path I'm taking to get to my point B. It's never going to work out that way. Life doesn't work that way. Life is going to amuse us. The universe, the world, God, however you term it, there's an amusing component in there. Oh, well, if you want to make, I think there's a quote that says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. Because we're always going to end up taking a different path. So I think it's important that we remain open to that and find simple ways to make it enjoyable. If the exercise class didn't work out, well, can you improvise? Can you, create your own class just on the spot and do something fun there and then? We have to create our own rules. There's so many rules in society, and honestly, I'm about not creating a society of rebels, but if we can make our own rules, as long as they align with respecting ourselves and others, then let's do so.
Right. Yeah. And there's a quote that resonates with me from Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Right. Yeah. And life often
or a mallet to the head.
Yeah, or a mallet to the head, right? And life has a way of doing that to us once in a while, to varying degrees of severity, right?
Yeah. So I think having that light heart and that flexibility is so important. And I know that sometimes when we're working with people who are very set on, well, I have to do it this way, I've always done it this way, there's a matter of like welcoming them into this world where it's like, why don't we try this? You don't have to like it, but just try it and see. Try anything once. It doesn't mean you have to do it twice.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's great advice. Something that I've been doing a lot of thinking around, and I think struggled with a little bit, is the idea of empathy and compassion as a supporter. So we've been talking a fair amount around the self-compassion piece, but maybe we can switch gears more into the compassion piece as a supporter. So there's many listeners to the podcast. They might be a parent that has a son or a daughter with a disability, or a sibling, or a supporter that works for an organization or directly for a person. So just to share a bit more around my struggle with it. So I think in the past, I've really taken as a family member, as a supporter to others, not even necessarily others with a disability, but just a supporter to others in general. I think as we all are to, our friends and our family, is taking an empathetic stance. And with that, it's really feeling what other people are feeling, and to some degree taking that on. And that's felt really really heavy. So, which is tough. And really trying to switch more into a place of compassion, which is really understanding the journey someone's going through, the experience someone's going through, but not necessarily taking those emotions on. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit to that and maybe your experience with it, and maybe, and if you have any thoughts on how to be compassionate with others. I don't know if you might have an example around that.
Sure. And if I could share with your listeners, I actually have another side to my work that I did after I was healing from lupus, which ties to empathy and compassion. Mm-hmm. And I'll just clarify up front. For me, like, empathy is, feeling the pain of another, and compassion is wanting to help alleviate that suffering, alleviate that pain. Mm-hmm. And after healing, I went into a very spiritual journey through my healing and really learned to incorporate that into a very, pragmatic, business grounded life perspective. But I became a Reiki master. For those who aren't familiar, Reiki is a form of healing energy. So essentially, I'm just kind of channeling this healing energy. But what I'm able to do with the clients I'm working with and have worked with was sense what was going on with them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So I can empathize with you in terms of how you feel taking that on. But one thing you learn in becoming a Reiki master is how to stay in your own energy and your own strength and your own potential. Just as an example, I was working with clients, one who had witnessed his father's suicide and was trying to get past that. I was working with multi-million-dollar business owners who were deciding whether to sell their business, leave their marriage, trying to determine what their life purpose was. People who had come from a very hard business background who were trying to become more heartfelt, more spiritual. So there was a lot of weight to the work. But I was able to stay in my own energy because I wanted to support those people in their healing. And I wanted to help share with them what I saw within them and what they could do to heal past that. But also, I knew that I could not do that without staying in my own strength and my own energy. So it was almost like being very aware of who I was. From an energetic visualization perspective, kind of what I did was you see your favorite color surrounding you, and it's almost like a permeable shield kind of. So the good energy can come in, but the bad energy, you can see it on the outside, but you don't take it on. So you can use a visualization like that to stay in your own. So you were looking for examples on how to be compassionate. And I think the best way to frame empathy and compassion is about perspective taking. So compassion involves seeing life through another's eyes, versus empathy is more that walking in their shoes perspective. And there's actually psychological research that supports this. Michael Pullen, who works at the University of New York at Buffalo, did a study in 2017 with his colleagues. And he differentiated between an imagine others perspective. So imagining what others see, their viewpoint on life and their understanding of life, versus imagining yourself. So imagining yourself in their shoes. And their research found that imagining others not only decrease their stress, but increase the health and well-being of the caregiver, of the provider. So I think it's almost like you're leaning in to be able to see life through someone's eyes, but you're not fully stepping in their shoes. And so you're saying, oh, okay, I can see how you see that. So I would understand how you feel angry or frustrated or hurt, or joyful on the other end of the spectrum, or happy or content, without taking that on. And I think self-awareness plays a great component in this as well, knowing who you are and being able to distinguish that is mine, that is my emotion, that is my energy, versus that's not my emotion, that's not my energy. I grew up being very, almost like an intuitive empath. So I would take on the emotions of others. And I was never one to become angry or sad. And if I felt it, I went, what's this? And realized that it wasn't my energy and I had taken it on. So I think there's a great element of that self-awareness, but being conscious to what's mine and what have I taken on for someone else. Because we're not truly helping others when we're taking on what they have. The idea is to help them grow through that and heal through that. And even in my work as a ghostwriter, I'm helping people become self-aware and self-express. They're telling their entire stories. We're diving into the depths of their lives. People are sharing with me their decades worth of journal notes, their deepest, most inner thoughts. And I have to write that for them. So I am them, but I'm not taking on their emotions. I'm feeling what they're feeling without, internalizing it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. And I'm just thinking through it. How do I put that into practice myself? Right. So my kind of evolution of my own, I guess, thought patterns has been to understand how others are feeling and to some degree, take that on. Now I have the understanding that, okay, taking on those emotions isn't beneficial to me or to that other person, because now my emotional state isn't in a place where I can be my best to support that other person, especially if it's a negative emotion or something that's drawing my energy down. So I'm firm in that understanding, right? So now it's okay. What about if I change my mindset so I can take on that other person's perspective, and I can try and look at the situation through their eyes without taking on the emotion. So I'm just trying to think through is there maybe a visual process, or like, I really liked how you use that Reiki technique and that visualization component of having that color surrounding you as like a bubble. So for me, I don't know why, just the color purple popped into my mind. So I'm envisioning like this purple bubble around me, and like the purple, like any positive energy can flow through that to me, and I can absorb that. But if it's a negative energy or red energy or whatever, that was the color that came to mind, it just it can't permeate, or it can't go through that bubble. So maybe that is the visualization technique.
Yeah.
But
And
I'm not sure what thoughts do you have?
Just from a very simple analogy perspective, think about watching a movie. When I was working with people in Reiki, I actually would see, and you kind of have to go to a more ethereal place to understand this, but I could actually see what was going on with them, and it flashed before my eyes like movie on a movie screen. So I could see what was going on with them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Think about when you're watching a movie, like a drama or, a romantic movie where you feel it. You might tear up, you might laugh. But when it's over, you haven't taken that on. You're just like, wow, that was really good. And I learned from that. And I think I'm better for having watched that because I saw a different perspective. Mm-hmm. But you don't internalize it, right? So you're there with it. And now you understand, that it's just a character in the movie, but if you're working with a real person, same thing, you understand that person from a more deeper perspective, and you're going forth with that greater understanding.
Yeah, I love that. So I think I'm gonna walk away and try some of these things, and our listeners might, if they resonate with them, they might as well. And I really like the idea of trying to visualize it as a movie, because I think it, in a way, it removes you one step from that emotional component of it, but still being able to be compassionate and support that person.
Yeah, and there's such a dance there, and I've seen it because I've spent months of my adult life in hospital, and there are doctors and nurses who are extremely compassionate, and there are those who are not at all compassionate. Yet I can understand where those who are not compassionate are coming from. Because imagine getting too attached to patients that you are losing, who don't make it through their illness, or their trauma or their injury. That's a heavy weight. So I can understand where they're coming from, but there's a balance. You can have that compassion and support your patients, while still holding your own and doing the job that you have to do. So there is a dance there, and you can pull from that emotional side, and you can also pull from that more pragmatic, I know what I have to do. I know what I have to do to keep moving forward and keep the people in my care moving forward. So I think for me, like, there's 4 elements, but I can drill it down. I call it 4 P's. If you want to look at compassion, it's really about presence. So being fully in the moment with that person or those people. Perspective taking, like we talked about, seeing the world through their eyes without fully emotionally stepping into their shoes. Patience, right? Being with them, or being with yourself, because we know how draining it can be when you're supporting, giving, being patient with those you serve and with yourself. And then support for forward progress, right? And again, compassion is small action. Every step counts, no matter how small the step.
I love that. So the 4 P's: presence, perspective, patience, and progress, and moving forward. I love that. So I think that there's a lot of value in there in this conversation for me personally, because it's given me some, I think it's helped me to further build that mental model around what really is compassion and how to practice it, and some tools to live that and to be that way that I'm going to try out. So I think that those are in there for the listeners as well. And one other thing that I wanted to talk about with you, Joscelyn, is around finding your voice, because that's really what you're doing a lot of the time as a ghostwriter and helping people to share their stories. So what can you share with us around finding your voice or helping other people to find their voice?
Incidentally, it's not so much different than what we just talked about: presence, perspective taking, patience, and progress. For me, voice is it's our gifts, our passions, and knowledge and perspective contributed in a way that creates empathy, growth, and ease of life for others. That's the way I define voice. So essentially what that means is it's how we're processing and disseminating our view on life, because we each have this uniquely valuable perspective on reality. And the value in contributing that is that we all grow from it, right? Without learning from each other, we just stay in our own tunnel. So I describe it almost like we're each driving in tunnels, and for each new perspective that we gain from others, it's like a little light hole has come in the side of the tunnel. And eventually those sides may become fully transparent when we open ourselves to an exponential number of perspectives. So I think finding our own voice, one analogy I like to use is like a seashell and listening into a giant seashell. And the old adage has it's the sound of the ocean you hear. What it really is the external environment resonating in that seashell. That's what your voice is. So to find that, it's really like listening to the seashell. You have to listen inside yourself. You have to self-observe and understand, how am I seeing the world? We all have this unique perspective based on our composite of experiences. No one has the experiences that you have, Eric. No one has the experiences that anyone listening has. That unique composite is yours, which has framed your perspective. That's your value. That's our greatest contribution, is to share with others, hey, here's how I see this. And help others develop that empathy and then compassion through learning about our perspective. Like, wow, they've been through that, and now they understand this aspect of life in a way that I didn't even know was possible to understand it. So it is a very deep process. It takes time, it takes that patience to get through it, but it's really about self-observation and self-exploration, and saying like, oh, and asking others like, hey, Eric, you just told me the value that you got from today. So I get a sense of what my voice is and how I'm helping others. Ask others how you are helping them, how you are serving them. And you'll start to see similar words come back. You'll start to see, oh, Joscelyn's very compassionate. Okay, she's helping me find my voice. Yes, okay, she's more like a catalyst to finding my voice. You'll start to see certain words come back when people describe your impact on them. And that is telling you what your value is, what your voice is. Does that help?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that I guess the lens that really resonated with me is coming from a lens of a supporter for a friend or someone with a disability, and sharing perspectives, sharing your perspective with them to help them get a more clear picture, right? I like the visual that you gave in terms of driving through that dark tunnel. You might have your headlights on in that tunnel driving through it, but as other people are able to give you different perspectives, that tunnel starts to fall away, or there's holes through it. And more light comes in, and you can see more of the full picture and see more of what's around you, see around corners. so that really resonated with me, and I think that's a good message to share.
Right. Yeah, like we're all individuals and we're all individual contributors to society. But by sharing that, we become a tighter collective, right? There's so much disconnect in our world between races, religions, political parties, whatever the case may be. So the more we contribute our perspectives, the more empathy and compassion we build, and we become a tighter collective as a global society.
So, Joscelyn, what is one thing that you would really like the listeners today to walk away with, or think about, or maybe even an action that you would like them to take?
I think just to make it really simple is that visual. So if you're feeling like I'm so drained because I know I'm taking on all the emotional weight, the mental weight, the physical weight, because when we internalize emotions, we do internalize that on a physical level too, and it can affect us physically. So how do we help provide that self-care while we're caring for others? So really, the next time you go to be with someone in your care, almost lean over and look the way they're looking. And in that instant, think of perspective taking. See the life through their eyes and realize that you are still standing in your own two shoes. So just take that practice with you. Next time you go to do that, lean in, look in the same direction, try to be one with their perspective, but realize that you're standing in your own.
Watch their movie.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, Joscelyn, how can folks connect with you? How can they learn more about you? How could they inquire about the services that you provide?
Well, if you're looking to find your voice, share your perspective, share your personal story, that's definitely something I can support. And you can find me at joscelynduffy.com. It's JOSCELYNDUFFY.com.
Excellent. And feel free to pick up Joscelyn's book on Amazon, Unshakable to the Core. And that's not the only book that you've written, Joscelyn. So where can folks look at the other books that you've authored?
There's a books link right on my website, or if you want to go to Amazon /author/Joscelyn Duffy, JOSCELYNDUFFY, you'll find several books there. And there's another one called Gift of the Hit, Collected Stories, which may be of interest to many people in there. And I know, Eric, I connected you with Sheila Morrison and her stories in there. And it's such a beautiful story about supporting her daughter with a developmental disability. And so there's a diversity of story in there, all people who have found that so-called gift within the hit, so the silver lining. So if you really want a punch of inspiration, that's definitely a book to pick up.
Mm-hmm. Inspiration, but also change, resiliency, and purpose.
Yeah, nuggets of wisdom, for
Exactly.
sure.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, Joscelyn. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks. Great to be here, Eric.
Thank you again to Joscelyn Duffy for coming on the podcast today. Such a great conversation for me, and I hope it was for you as well. Joscelyn really helped to get my thinking clearer around the difference between empathy and compassion and how to be a more compassionate person myself. So hopefully you got a little bit of that through osmosis through our conversation as well. And it leads you towards being a more compassionate person, more compassionate towards yourself and more compassionate towards others that you serve. And I hope that there's maybe some great things in there for you around resiliency. Coming up next week on the podcast, we have guest Lynn Siegel. And Lynn is the executive director of an organization called Hope House. And Hope House has gone through a pretty major transformation, closing down their group homes and supporting individuals one person at a time to get their own, to get a home of their own. And the interesting part of this change with Hope House is it was done well over 20 years ago. So I know a lot of organizations are thinking about doing this type of move today, but Lynn shares her wisdom of what they went through and what they learned. So I think you'll enjoy that conversation next week. And thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. If you like this episode and you think you know someone that would benefit, please share it with them. Be a part of the change to think differently about disability.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Visit us at empoweringability.org for more podcasts and resources to help you and your loved ones impacted by disability live a full and meaningful life.